In this program, some of the names of the participants have been changed to protect their identity. In Ontario, Canada, spring thaw brings signs of new life. But on April 17, 2001, near the small town of Flanbury, the spring thaw revealed something far more gruesome. It was 3:40 p.m. when a jogger noticed a strange pile set among the weeds just off a rural highway. It was a horrific sight, a badly decomposed human body. The man quickly returned to the highway and ran for help.
911, police, fire, ambulance, what is your emergency?
An emergency operator received the call and immediately dispatched members of the Hamilton Police Service. Officials cordoned off the area. Detective Sergeant Mike Thomas was put in charge of the case.
When I arrived, we saw a badly decomposed body laying about 12 to 15 feet from the roadway. We're not positive of what had happened, but we handled the scene as a major crime scene.
There was little skin left, leaving the skull and bones exposed to the elements. Investigators had no idea if they were looking at the victim of a hit-and-run accident or possibly someone who had suffered a heart attack or some other serious illness and simply collapsed in the ditch. Their theories seemed unlikely when officials noted remnants of a black bra and nightgown. But it was the position of the body that intrigued pathologist Dr. David King.
The left arm was down alongside the body, but the right arm was bent under the chest. It looked as if the body had either been thrown or rolled in that position. I thought that was significant. Typically in a hit and run, there are multiple fractures: the pelvis, the chest, what's called a bumper fracture on the lower legs.
Dr. King observed no such injuries and ruled out that possibility.
Okay.
Detectives also found fingernails in the soil, a necklace, and a wedding ring.
The jewelry wasn't extremely expensive jewelry, but it wasn't very cheap jewelry as well. Even though through the decomposition we could see that the fingernails at one time were well manicured and groomed, and certainly we didn't would not be consistent with one of our street prostitutes that had been murdered and left out in this area.
There was no way of knowing if the victim was a local or a stranger to the area. The remote site was adjacent to a farmer's field and not far from an African lion safari, an attraction that brought tourists from all over the province. The woman could be from anywhere. Her body was removed from the site and taken for autopsy. Investigators hoped they could find the clues they so desperately sought in the lab. Dr. David King performed the autopsy, declaring the victim to be female. The cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head.
She had what's called depressed fracturing of the right side of the skull. That's in an area above her right ear. I think there were at least 2 blows, could be more, inflicted into the skull from the side. I think the victim was most probably taken by surprise, may well have been asleep in bed.
Dr. King retrieved insect specimens from bodily tissues. The insects would help determine time of death.
We did a number of other things to, as we hoped, identify her. Dental charting, took samples for DNA I removed several of the fingers with skin still on them in anticipation that fingerprints could be obtained and she might be identified this way.
Dr. Shelley Saunders, a forensic anthropologist at McMaster University, assisted Dr. King in evaluating the remains.
Where the teeth are, if there's prominence of the area where the teeth are
She
held,
determined the victim's
looking at
age
the
and
shape of
ethnicity.
The nasal area here, the profile of the nasal area. Looking
I
at the
determined the individual was likely from Southern Asia, that is the subcontinent of India.
Hamilton police contacted law enforcement throughout the U.S. and Canada, but there were no missing person reports matching that description.
That was certainly putting a huge wall up for us at the time, and our first priority had to be to find out who this person was.
To find the murder victim's identity, Detective Gary Zwicker was tasked with retrieving prints from the black mummified fingers collected at autopsy.
I immersed them in a rehydration solution, checked them periodically, and I tried to obtain some prints.
The rehydrating solution plumped up the mummified tissue like air filling a flat tire.
The fingers were rehydrated, however, the skin was extremely hard and firm, which didn't allow me to roll a proper impression at the time.
If law enforcement officials couldn't identify who was murdered, they could at least figure out when. Dr. Dale Morris, a forensic entomologist, hoped to determine time of death using weather reports, mathematical equations, and data culled from bugs found at the scene.
I've found several different kinds of insects on the remains. The most important were the 4 species of blowflies. They lay their eggs on a dead body, sometimes within minutes of death, sometimes within hours of death.
After determining the age of the insects, Dr. Morris simply counted backward from April.
The insects had began to colonize her remains the previous September. Came up with September 20th.